Friends in need. Friends indeed. Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong Un are meeting in North Korea. It will reunite the leaders of perhaps the most isolated countries in the world today. Putin thanked North Korea ahead of his trip for its support for Russia's invasion in Ukraine. This trip's expected to see agreements for North Korean arms and ammunition to be used in Ukraine by Russian forces. Two men then creating their parallel world. Both Russia and North Korea are under UN sanctions over their rogue state activities. Putin and Kim in many ways personify their crimes and contraventions. This visit follows their get-together in Russia's far west some 9 months ago. Here at France 24, Monty Francis with this.
North Korea rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin, who stepped off his plane in Pyongyang at 2:45 a.m. local time, up late to greet the Russian president, North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. The two leaders vowing to strengthen trade and security ties during their two-day visit and sharing a resentment of the United States. The deepening relationship between Russia and North Korea a source of concern in the West.
So North Korea is helping Russia to conduct a war of aggression against Ukraine, and in return, Russia is delivering technology for their missile and nuclear programs.
Russia is now in its third year of a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and while Pyongyang denies supplying arms, since a meeting with Kim and Putin in Russia last September, U.S. officials say North Korea has sent some 7,000 containers of weapons to Russia, including dozens of ballistic missiles that have been used on the battlefield. Putin's visit also comes amid growing concerns about Russian technology helping North Korea to enhance its nuclear weapons and missile programs, concerns echoed by South Korea, with tensions along the border running high. Just on Tuesday, dozens of North Korean soldiers crossed the border and then retreated after warning shots were fired, the second such incident in as many weeks. Putin and Kim have also pledged to cooperate economically to help offset sanctions imposed by the West. The U.S. and EU have imposed sanctions on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, and North Korea has been under UN sanctions for its missile and nuclear programs since 2006.
The visit ongoing in Pyongyang. Vladimir Putin arrived a few hours ago. They have much to talk about, as you can imagine, much in common. And much of the world, of course, watching and wondering what is going on. Let's get some insight and analysis. Kerry Brown joins us. Kerry Brown is a professor of Chinese studies and director of the Lau China Institute at King's College in London. Professor Brown, thank you for being with us. We appreciate your time and we're looking forward to your insight. Now, China's specialist is what I'm seeing and hearing. China's footprint is obviously all over what is happening right now. We can get onto that in a moment. Can I start by asking you what you think both Putin and Kim want out of this visit?
Well, as you said, friends in need. It's the first visit for a quarter of a century. Historically, Russia, the USSR as it was before 1991, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea have been close. But really, once the fall of the Soviet Union happened in 91, that relationship cooled down. But now, because of the war with Ukraine, Russia is isolated. Really, its main alliances are with China. And of course, North Korea has been accused of supplying it with weaponry. With this visit, they're going to thicken the relationship. It's a relationship purely of convenience, I imagine. It's not like they're natural bedfellows. However, they're both isolated. They both have economic problems. Russia because of the sanctions, shorter term, but the DPRK because of sanctions that have been in place because of its nuclear program. So they're both isolated. Therefore, what better than to make friends?
That issue of arms for Ukraine, let's explore that, please, if you don't mind. North Korea has been accused of supplying arms. There's been even talk perhaps of perhaps supplying personnel at some point. Nothing's developed on those lines. And the suspicion perhaps that China is somewhere in the background in that arms supply. Can you shed any light on that for us?
Well, China and North Korea have a very complicated relationship. It's like master-servant in some ways, but sometimes you wonder who is the master and who is the servant. For China, its stakes, they're very high. It's got more to lose. The DPRK has put something like a quarter of its GDP into the military. So it's in a position to export this technology, and there's very few people that can take this technology because of the sanctions. Russia is therefore a natural market for it. It does not care as much for the views of the outside world as China does, because China has got much more economic integration into the outside world, despite political issues. I mean, it's a vastly bigger economy. I mean, the DPRK, I think, is 2% of the South Korean economy. I mean, it's tiny. But I mean, the DPRK has the kind of privilege of a small player in a way. I mean, it can be very, very adventurous and reckless, but a small player with nuclear weapons. So this makes it a very unique actor.
And in terms of what will be supplied, we have had reports of hardware being found on battlefields in Ukraine, which they can trace to North Korea. Is there anything, do you think, to be seen in the possibility of North Korean soldiers being sent to Ukraine?
I would imagine not. I think that despite the fact that the North Korean Standing Army, I believe, is something like 2 million out of a population of about 24 million. I mean, it's an enormous army. But I think that that probably would be a step too far. I mean, mercenaries maybe, but I don't know whether there is such a thing as a North Korean mercenary. But I mean, for North Korea, its alliance this is an economic opportunity. It is making money out of selling weapons. I mean, I don't think it's particularly caring whether Russia wins or loses or whatever. I mean, this is a commercial relationship in a way. It's an arms dealer, a nation that's an arms dealer, and it's making money from Russia, which needs this at the moment. In the past, Russia and North Korea were not easy bedfellows, as I've said. But I think Putin going there is a sign, in a sense, of his vulnerability and isolation now, because this is a man who once walked the world stage. Now, it's very restricted where he can go. He can go to China and he can go to North Korea. They won't arrest him because of the warrants out for him, but he can't go anywhere else.
So in terms of Putin's options, clearly they are limited in spite of the fact, say, at the peace summit in Switzerland, the Ukraine peace summit, there were many global South countries that didn't quite sign up wholeheartedly to the accord to say that Ukraine should be returned to its 1991 borders, that kind of thing. There's a sense there that some countries may have a little bit of support for Russia, viewing countries like the BRICS, for instance, that kind of thing. Here, though, what does North Korea get from the Russian side of things? Clearly, Russia could get arms ammunition. What can North Korea hope to see coming back, apart from money?
Well, I think that North Korea expects some kind of diplomatic support. After all, Russia is a member of the P5 on the UN Security Council. That matters. Russia is a potential ally, in the UN generally. I mean, North Korea is extremely isolated. It's got the relationship and actually a formal a kind of treaty, a security treaty with China. And then it's got a less formal relationship with Russia. And then that's really it. It's got a very, very limited set of friendships. So, in terms of kind of eroding that isolation, this kind of visit is important. This is very important for Kim Jong Un, the leader of North Korea, the supreme leader, because he doesn't have the chance often to receive a leader of a sort of significant country. I mean, he's either receiving Chinese or he's receiving people from countries that are much, much smaller. But with Russia, this is significant for his own internal propaganda. We have to remember his priority, though, is to just maintain this family-run regime. It's in its third generation now. There's been reports about his health not being great in the recent years. Who knows? I mean, his daughter has sometimes appeared by his side, but she's very young. I mean, this is a regime that is absolutely dependent on him and his family's rule. And that they will do anything to make sure that that happens, including having the kind of lifeline diplomatically and economically that Russia can offer.
It's all about expediency. That's what I'm hearing. There are some observers who talk about the term is bromance, a kind of male camaraderie thing going on between Putin and Kim. Would that be a stretch, do you think, to say that there's that kind of appreciation?
Well, I think that Putin and Kim, I don't know what the chemistry is between them. I mean, obviously on the films they look friendly enough. But I mean, politicians are good actors. I mean, Kim Jong Un is actually, when he met Trump, obviously a couple of times when Trump was president, he's perfectly capable as a diplomatic actor. But he presides over a regime which obviously is extremely isolated and very problematic. But I mean, I'm sure that they will have created some kind of rapport. Through necessity, but also because, in a sense, they have some common problems. They have a lot of common problems. But whether this can be really called a kind of deeper alliance, I think, you know, Russia and North Korea are in very, very different situations. I think historically, until very recently, Russia would not have thought of the DPRK being a place to spend much time thinking about beyond the problems of its nuclearization. But now it's kind of really one of the few places that Putin can go and enact this diplomatic theater that he does. And so suddenly it's become very, very important. Kim Jong Un and the regime, they're excellent at exploiting these opportunities. They've been exploiting their relationships with China for decades. So that's, I think, what they're doing with the new opportunity with Russia now.
Final question, coming back to China. China, perhaps the one state that knows what's going on in Moscow and Pyongyang. Antony Blinken, just a few hours ago, alongside NATO's Jens Stoltenberg, said China's support for Russia's defence industry is prolonging the Ukraine war and it has to stop. Final comment on that one, please, Professor Brown.
Yes, I mean, of course, the road to kind of peace in Ukraine, many people believe runs through Beijing, not necessarily through Moscow. I mean, of course, Moscow is important, but Beijing is really the key partner here. The problem is for China, it doesn't see NATO and the Western alliance as ones it particularly wants to support. It's trying to sit on the fence. Pressure will do something. I think it will not get directly involved, but I think that it will be very hard for China not to stand by its alliance with Russia, not least because they share a huge border and they have to get on whether they like it or not.
Professor Kerry Brown, thank you very much indeed, sir. A Professor of Chinese Studies, Director of the Lau China Institute at King's College London. Thank you for joining us here on France 24. We appreciate your time and your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. That's apropos with Professor Kerry Brown of King's College in London. We're looking at the Putin-Kim meeting in Pyongyang, and of course we'll bring you more on that as it happens. Stay with us.